Hello and welcome to RPG Research. I'm your host and founder of RPG Research, and today, Hawk Robinson, and today we are talking about an introduction to recreation therapy. We just wrapped up a little bit about play therapy and trying to help people understand how play therapy is distinctly different from recreation therapy and how recreation therapy is a much better match for role-playing gaming than a play therapy setting. A lot of the principles and methodologies of play therapy don't really map that well to role-playing gaming. They might work okay in a LARP or video game setting, but they really wouldn't work in a tabletop setting because it's much about being pre-verbal. And it's not that you can't use some of the principles, but it's really not the best match of tools. But recreation therapy is arguably a much better match. So we're going to go over, this is just the first in multiple modules on recreation therapy and how they relate to role-playing gaming. And we're going to do a high-level introduction of some key concepts, some favorite quotes, things like that, and then a kind of lengthy checklist of what's important to be a recreational therapist and recreation therapy. But there's like 40-something of them, and 30-something of them can also make you a better role-playing gamer / game master. So that has a lot of relevant points. So one of the things is that it was World War II that kind of brought on the World War I and II kind of resulted in so many amputees and other serious injuries that it triggered changes in trying to improve and find other methods of treating and helping patients, so different care modalities. Some early leaders in the modern treatment era were Paul Hahn, Carl Menninger, and Ethel Kennedy. Hahn was a physician and advocate for the therapeutic benefits of recreation in the 40s and 50s, who wrote and presented extensively in arguing for use of recreation as a viable therapeutic modality, providing psychological benefits for patients. Carl Menninger was also a physician and influential advocate from the late 40s, from the 40s through the 60s, demonstrating and educating on the clinical benefits and effectiveness as part of psychiatric practice, trying to get it accepted as a standard part of such practice, so using recreation. He founded the Menninger Clinic. Some of you may or may not have heard of.
No.
Okay. You looking to do something, John?
Plug this in.
Okay. Let me plug it into this one here. Okay. Do you know whose power this is? It's been lying around. Somebody left it here.
We got some talks, but I don't know.
It's been here for quite a while. All right. And then in the 60s, Ethel Kennedy founded the Special Olympics via the Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. Foundation. One of her main foci was to grow a formalized community movement organization for growing the recognition of the benefits from and the use of recreation in community-based programs for the... So back then the term was MR, mentally retarded. Now we say developmentally delayed. But back then that was the correct term. Let's see, we already talked about... Okay, well, actually this came up in our quiz. So which law was it, John and Danielle, because this came up in the quiz, that required public buildings and facilities constructed with federal monies be made accessible for the handicapped? What year was it, at least?
1976, right?
Nope, but close.
I'm not even sitting there. I'm staring up at Danielle, hoping that I will see it in her cartoon eyes.
I know it wasn't the idea, and
it wasn't the ADA.
It wasn't the ADA.
This is the precursor. It's the Oaks elderly. That's not the elderly?
No, it was the one for war veterans. Focus. I just can't think of the name.
This is one we got to study more on. Because we all got it wrong last time.
I'm not sure, actually, this exact one was on there. I think it was precursor, it was on there. So it required public buildings and facilities constructed with federal monies be made accessible for the handicapped. PL 90-480 was the Architectural Barriers Act, or the ABA. 1968.
1968 Architectural Barriers Act.
Yeah.
1968 Architectural Barriers Act. Let's see if I can remember that longer than an hour. Or today.
Yeah. So what was happening before is generally most approaches take the medical model and a focus on illness approach rather than the holistic wellness model, which is more focused on an overall big picture and the wellness of the client. So it's a key difference. So, for example, holistic medicine treats the person rather than the disease. Its concern lies with the whole person and with permitting individuals to assume self-responsibility for their own health. The ultimate aim of well medicine, in contrast to the traditional medicine normally practiced by the medical community, is to be that of moving individuals toward self-actualization, whereas illness is the sole concern of traditional medicine. Well medicine deals with wellness or health promotion. So self-actualization is that hierarchy of needs on Maslow's pyramid and such, getting towards that top of the pinnacle. Let's see. So some key definitions. 14 criteria for evaluating an individual's state of health. Now, this is not going to be super useful for just the average role-playing gamer. This is going to be more for the therapist. But there might be a few things here that you might find actually a little bit useful. So, for example, number 1, there's 14. Exhibits personal growth and positive change over time. Number 2, identifies long-term and short-term goals that guide behavior. Instead of just responding to everything, actually setting goals, both near and long-term. Number 3, prioritizes identified goals. Some of us, that can be a struggle. Number 4, exhibits awareness of alternative behavioral options to accomplish goals. So they don't just keep doing the same thing over and over and over. Number 5, perceives optimum health as a primary life purpose. Number 6, engages in interpersonal relationships that are satisfying and fulfilling, rather than harmful and draining and detrimental. Number 7, actively seeks new experiences that expand knowledge or increase competencies for personal care. Number 8, displays a high tolerance for new and unusual situations or experiences. So being adaptive to changing situation, not being rigid. Number 9, derives satisfaction from the experience of daily living, instead of being Eeyore. Number 10, expends more energy in acting on the environment than reacting to it. A lot of people are just response, rather than planning and taking control.
One of the things I was learning in the library was that the higher up you are on Maslow's needs being met, the longer your planning stage is. If you're really down at the bottom, you're trying to survive 1 hour to the next.
You're trying to breathe.
Right.
You're trying to get homeostasis of your body heat, freezing or roasting. You are trying to quench thirst.
3 minutes, 3 hours, 3 days.
You're trying to satisfy food. Yeah. Sleep, each of these things, yeah. Number 11, recognizes barriers to growth and deals constructively in removing or ameliorating them. Number 12, uses self-monitoring and feedback from others to determine personal and social effectiveness. So some people are just oblivious to how their behavior is affecting other people. I wonder, in that chat room discussion we saw earlier today.
Yes.
Yeah. Some people are just not.
Because what was happening had to go beyond just the use of the nickname.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there had to be something else, and the person's just blind. Number 13, maintains conditions of internal stability compatible with continuing existence, homeostasis. Number 14, anticipates internal and external threats to stability and takes preventive actions, so immediate dangers and such. So that, good list there. If you've got all those things checked off, you're in the right pathway for health and such. So recreation, just recreation versus leisure.
Right.
Recreation involves activity as one component, but recreation is more than activity. Recreation produces restorative results. Through recreation, people restore themselves. They regain their equilibrium so that they can once again resume their quest for actualization. Leisure may be seen as a means to self-actualization. Through leisure experiences, challenges are met. These leisure experiences feature self-determination, intrinsic motivation, and mastery and competence. You'll hear us use those terms all the time. Experiences that lead people toward feelings of self-efficacy, empowerment, pleasure, and enjoyment. A unique virtue of recreation and leisure is that they are components of life. What?
I was just going to see the title of the book. I was trying not to disturb you.
Oh.
No, it failed.
Components of life free from constraint. People are in control while experiencing recreation and leisure. There are perhaps no other parts of our lives where we as human beings achieve as high a level of health as possible in order to achieve as high a quality of life as can be attained. And actually, that didn't make sense because I jumped paragraphs. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Human beings,
well used.
Yes, it is, are allowed more self-determination. That makes more sense. During recreation and leisure, we can be ourselves. We can let our hair down. We are allowed to be human with all of our imperfections and frailties. The caring, accepting attitude that the TR specialist, Therapeutic Recreation Specialist, TRS, assumes in creating a free and non-threatening recreation and leisure environment, so you can see play therapy create that environment as well, allows for positive interpersonal relationships, so that's the same as play therapy, as well as for opportunities for accomplishment. That's different from play therapy. Play therapy does let them do stuff and everything, and they paint and make stuff and do things.
Right, so there's no goal.
It's not goal-oriented.
Yeah.
And rec therapy tends to be a little more goal-oriented. So therapeutic recreation may be perceived to be a means first to restore oneself or regain stability of equilibrium following a threat to health protection. Second, to develop oneself through leisure as a means of self-actualization, health promotion. And then additionally, therapeutic recreation may be seen as a means of preventing health problems, although the preventive function of therapeutic recreation has only recently been begun to develop. Now, this book's from 2000, so it's a little dated.
Right.
But the concepts are the same. So therapeutic recreation has the primary goals of restoring health and helping people learn how to use their leisure and optimizing their potentials in order to enjoy as high a quality of life as possible. TR provides for the stabilizing tendency by helping individuals to restore health and actualizing tendency by enabling persons to use leisure as a means to personal growth. Now, it is a continuum, and talking about prescriptive activities versus recreation and leisure. So we've got a diagram here. You will, in rec therapy, you will see diagrams of this layout over and over and over again. I'll put it up the camera in a minute, too. So you'll see this always going from the left to the right, from the X and Y up.
Right.
You will see a whole bunch of models using that diagram. And we're going to talk about it in a moment here. I'm just giving you the visual cue.
Okay. And what is the name of this book again?
Well, this is just an introduction to TR.
Okay.
Third edition, Therapeutic Recreation Introduction by Austin and Crawford. I'm sure there's a much better, newer version. It's what I have from my library. So, yeah, but all the points are the same. So if you can see on here or not, You got XY axis, and there's a continuum going from down on the bottom going up. And we're going to talk about the changes in that going across. But you will see that particular diagram used over and over and over again as we talk about different concepts. So in that lower left-hand corner, the prescriptive activities, the therapeutic recreation specialist is, TR is outer directed and is structured. The stability tendency, the TRS is active, client choice is limited. It's TRS directed activity, and the client control is very small. So you need to do this, now do this, now do this. You don't have a whole lot of freedom in what your activities are because we're targeting something very specific on a very narrow scope.
Right.
So that's prescriptive. Your doctor said you need to do these things. So I've come up with a program and we're going to do these things to help you meet the doctor's needs. As you improve, whether it's physical, mental, social, emotional, whatever, as you're improving, then we start to get a little bit more towards recreation where the stability tendency declines, so the recreation therapist specialist role narrows, and the client, the actualization tendency grows, so the client role it grows. The client is in more control of the activities. So now we might say, well, we've got 3 or 4 activities now to pick from that'll meet the goals we're working for. Which of those 3 or 4 do you want? So before we said, you're going to do this one.
Right.
In this order, this way. Now you've learned 3 or 4 or 5 as we went through that prescriptive stage. Now we're coming back to you and go, well, which one would you like to do today? You've got a little more freedom to choose as long as we keep progressing. So you open that up, more and more freedom and control. Then finally, when it gets to leisure, basically discharge or ready, close to discharge, it's self-directed. So now the recreation therapist is shrinking to nothing. And all of the control and all the activities becomes more and more client-directed. So actualization tendency, client has freedom of choice. They can do it or not do it. You're not there anymore to tell them to do it or not do it. It's all on them. And if you did a good job and they're intrinsically motivated and all of that, and then they'll keep doing it on their own. And now it's usually an enjoyable activity, but they're still getting all these benefits, from it. And it's a way to maintain health and hopefully not slide back and potentially keep growing on their own.
To put it in an RPG perspective, railroad, sandbox, GM.
Sort of, yeah.
Well, it's really broad brush there, but
all right. So the leisure, there's a few models. There's a few models of practice. One of the best-known models of therapeutic recreation is the leisure ability model, the LAM. Hello, Danielle.
Hi.
Do you remember the leisure ability model?
Yes, but I cannot see it very knowledgeably right now.
That's fine.
Pounding.
Your what? Your head's pounding? I'm sorry.
Pounding.
Okay. So it envisions...
I'm laying on the floor.
Oh, man. So the leisure ability model, the LAM, envisions that the major TR mission is to be, quote, a satisfying leisure lifestyle that is the independent functioning of the client in leisure experiences and activities of his or her choice. So that upper right-hand corner, the most freedom available. I have a number of injuries now. I can't do all the things I used to like to do. The ideal is to get back to doing all the activities I want to do.
We'll get you back to cliff diving in no time.
That's not one of the ones I want to do. Skydiving, yes. Cliff diving doesn't have any appeal to me. Yeah. And I miss skiing, but my lungs are too shot now to go up on the mountains. Because now I get, like, the way that they've improved the skis, I can ski again. Even with my knee injuries, the way the new skis are so much better, my knees can handle it. I couldn't ski on the old skis back in the 80s because after the damage in the 90s to my meniscus, it tore it apart. The new skis are so easy, I was able to ski again. It was wonderful. And then my lungs got ruined. Now I can't handle the altitude.
You just need an oxygen tank.
Yeah. Great. All right, so this model, LAM, has 3 major parts. The first is functional intervention, then leisure education, then recreation participation. So functional intervention deals with improving functional ability. So similar to the prescriptive activity portion of the health protection or health promotion model, the responsibility for the content of the intervention is primarily in the hands of the TR specialist. The second one is the leisure education, which is focused on the client gaining leisure-related attitudes, knowledge, and skills. So learning new games, learning new game systems. You know, like, well, I don't always get to play. I don't usually have friends to play with. Well, great. Let's have you learn some solo adventure stuff. Here's some solo adventure stuff you could get. Or here's what you can do for a video game. Or we will educate you to solve these barriers to recreation and leisure. And then the third one is recreation participation. It has to do with structured activities that give the client the opportunity to practice new skills while enjoying a recreation experience. Another model is the Therapeutic Recreation service delivery model. And anyway, there's a bunch of them. Here's some important thing between all the models. So looking at all the different TR models, right, there's 5 common things between them. All of the models reflect something in some variation of the following 5. A continuum of growth and intervention.
Okay.
Right? A belief in the strengths and abilities of the individual. Increasing freedom and self-determination. Decreasing therapist control. And increasing involvement and participation in the natural community or, in inclusion in general.
Society.
Yeah, just being able to be included in activities again. So therapeutic recreation should be reserved for purposeful interventions using prescribed activities and recreation or leisure experiences. Inclusive recreation should be employed to describe the general provision of access to recreation opportunities by persons with disabilities. So our Drop-In RPG is very much an inclusive recreation program. It's not a TR program.
Right.
It's not a therapeutic recreation program. Even though we're doing it as an educational program, it is more of a TR program over at the school for those kids.
Right.
Right. We are being inclusive, but we're helping them along there, but they have given us a little bit of goals with the creative writing and stuff, so that's why we added some of those. Even though it's still
Which is why we journal.
That's why it's still a little loosey-goosey, but yeah. Okay. There's 2 really long lists, and I think we have time to get through them. I'm going to come to the 2 lists. So that's the second list. It's 44 items and 23 items. Are you zoned out yet?
Are you still absorbing, or are you like, oh God, make it stop?
It's a mix. When I'm paying attention, I absorb.
Let's see here. So here's a bunch of kindred professions to recreation therapy. Medical doctors, nurses, psychologists, social workers, play therapists. We just talked about those in the previous segment. Vocational rehabilitation counselors. I just got a phone call from a Native American vocational rehabilitation counselor just last week, remember?
Yeah. Was there any OT?
Yeah. Physical therapists, occupational therapists, music therapists, art therapists, dance therapists, and then activity therapy and rehabilitation therapy services. So if you read the occupational therapy thing, it gets close, but this is when they were more distinctive. Occupational therapists use purposeful activities with persons with limitations due to physical injury, illness, psychosocial disorders, developmental or learning disabilities, economic and cultural differences, or aging processes. Okay, that sounds no different than what we do. In order to increase independent functioning, maintain health, and prevent disability. Pretty darn close.
Yeah.
Doesn't say recreation, it's purposeful activities. And traditionally, those activities are getting up in the morning, doing your morning routine, getting out the door, work,
ADL,
scheduling, all of those. Yeah,
activities of daily living.
Yeah, that was very typical of an occupational therapist or a rehabilitation therapist, which I've done. They have, in more recent years, added recreation into their charter of descriptions and legally here in Washington State.
Yes, and I've had other therapists that, just talk therapists saying, yeah, OT's trying to step on our toes too.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they're trying to be very broad. Money, money, money.
Money, money, money.
In rec therapists, we often step on art and music therapy.
Right.
Because those are recreational activities, so we often do those as well. And if you look at the training manuals for music therapy, they're identical to recreation therapy. They're the exact same checklists and everything, because they all came from the same place. They all came from that World War I nurse playing guitar or doing activities with the veterans there.
Florence Nightingale?
Well, that was but yeah, I mean, basically, effectively.
Pre-World War I is Florence Nightingale.
But that's effectively, they came from the identical roots. Just music requires specialized knowledge, and so it's become its own specialty.
Right. Like dentistry.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That was kind of random.
Top of the hair to the bottom of the feet, it's all medicine.
Right. Yeah.
But some people specialize on a single body part.
Yeah. Okay, so
insurance company.
tenets basic to therapeutic recreation practice. This is bloody long. This is 23 tenets.
I will not memorize them.
Not at this stage. You will have to if you want to get certified.
Yeah, eventually I'll memorize them. Not tonight.
To function as promoters of health, TRSs rest their practice on a belief system. The following statements, now this might be a little dated, because again, this book is almost 20 years old, but for the most part, it holds up. The following statements provide basic tenets for therapeutic recreation practice as perceived by these people here. They're intended to further interpret the TR continuum and the purpose of therapeutic recreation as opposed to special recreation. And it goes into more detail later on. So, Danielle, if you hear any of these contradicting some of the newer literature, let me know.
I will.
Because you and I are of two generations here of TR books. So, 1, illness, poor health, and wellness, optimal health, are dimensions of health that may be perceived to be on a continuum.
Okay.
That's very much within the DSM-5 approach, as opposed to the DSM-4, which was much more category and checklist. Right. Everything now is very much on continuum. So spectrum, autism spectrum, things like that. Number 2, the higher the state of self-actualization, the more optimal is the state of health of the individual. Number 3, problems in health produce needs that may be fulfilled through interactions between clients and TR specialists. The stability tendency motivates clients toward need fulfillment, leading to health protection. So down here, leading up to here. Right. Number 4, the actualization tendency motivates clients toward health promotion. Therapeutic recreation specialists engage in mutual participation with clients motivated by the actualization tendency, but move toward giving more and more control to the clients as they become healthier, as we saw in the diagram. It actually may not need to read all this part through. I'm going to go straight to the other checklist that I like better. And it is just literally a bullet list. And this one ties in better with role-playing games, too.
Okay.
So there's 44 of them. But they're mostly one-liners. So, theories/understandings. So these are areas of competency that you as an emerging TR specialist or as an emerging game master or player archetype specialist or RPG facilitator or RPG advocate should look at. Not all of these will apply to you, but many of them will. So theories and understandings of play, recreation, and leisure. That applies to everybody. So we have, through different theories, had a better understanding of how to play the game and to GM the game and how to observe others playing the game and their immersion levels and enjoyment levels and what makes them more disruptive versus other types. Understanding these theories helps us better define those things. Number 2, human development throughout the lifespan. So understanding that younger kids who are pre-verbal are going to struggle with a more verbal-only interaction as opposed to having more physical needs to get up and move around and such, and adapting your role-playing game so that they can have those physical breaks. Because otherwise it takes more energy to sit still than to get up and move around and do the activities more physically. So you can actually exhaust them by forcing them to sit at the table too long versus having them run around for a much longer period of time.
Can you enforce that in the school system?
There have been a lot of movements trying to do that.
I know, it just bugs me.
Yeah.
It's like why recess existed in the first place.
And a lot of schools have been getting rid of recess.
Yeah.
Shrinking it and eliminating it. It's the exact opposite of what needs to be happening. Number 3.
Create behaviors and more punishment.
Yep. Number 3, understanding of anatomy and physiology.
Obviously. I gotta know where that arrow hit.
If you're creating a torture chamber.
Yeah.
Number 4, basic assumptions about human nature. You know, how is somebody going to respond to different things? And in the game, if you expose the players to a certain situation, a basic understanding of how people are going to react to that is going to help the game play better than if you don't understand.
A good understanding.
Like some people who don't understand why their entire group left them and have banned them from their house, and they don't know why.
For me in the role-playing game, understanding human nature, a lot of it comes down to how people respond to fight, flight, or freeze.
Mm-hmm.
I'm missing one.
I thought that was it.
Yep, it's fight or flight or freeze.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's usually fight or flight, and then there's the freeze option, which is basically a form of flight. But, yeah.
Except you don't get very far.
Well, it's an internal flight.
The mind flight.
Yeah.
Your body does not.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Number 5, etiology, course, and prognosis of various diagnostic categories. So, for example, with muscular dystrophy, we needed to understand, between the 40 different disorders that fit under muscular dystrophy, what activities in role-playing gaming our muscular dystrophy participants could do, and what level of functioning they were at, and remember the goal was to wear them out, because if they don't use it, they lose it.
Right.
And so we needed to be okay with fatiguing them. In fact, the goal was to fatigue them because that would help them stay stronger longer. So understanding that with muscular dystrophy, that was a goal, meant we designed our role-playing games, our LARP and our tabletop, a very specific way to target that. Versus brain injury, where you want to get as much neuroplasticity engagement as possible before you wear them out, because once they get tired to a certain point, they get tired very quickly. It's detrimental rather than beneficial, which is a very different approach. So with brain injury, you would break it up into much smaller chunks. With the muscular dystrophy, we tried to push them as long as we could keep pushing them to help them grow. Different approach. You have to understand these different needs for these different disorders. Disease sequelae, so the progression of a disease. So if somebody has Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or muscular dystrophy,
Right.
what the expected progression is so that you can adjust accordingly. Number 7, effects of stress on individuals. Stress shuts people down. You get to a certain threshold of stress, they get reactive, they shut down, their brain gets overwhelmed, all those cortisol hormones stress is just a killer, literally. Stress out your rules lawyer and they act up and kill the game. Right? If they're under too much stress and you haven't figured out how to ameliorate that to help them feel less stressed out because you've made some ruling, they're like, no, that's not in the rules. There are no elves in my campaign. There are no kung fu monks in my campaign. Sound familiar from Gamers 2? It stressed him out and he was very reactive.
Like somebody recently getting stressed out of the idea of not having demi-human races.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Come on. I would actually like to run a campaign with no demi-human races, all humans, just so the fairies are actually special. When you encounter a fairy, it's, oh my God, not like, really? You're only that kind of fairy?
If you want a really gritty one, 3rd edition Iron Heroes is a really gritty setting. They took 3rd edition, made it really deadly.
Okay.
Like hard to survive. And they really, it was based more on True 20, I think.
Okay.
So it's meant to be a little more, quote unquote, realistic and grittier play, 3rd edition. Been a long time since I played it, like 15 years, but
does it also have the magic and wonder of meeting elves and fairies and...
Well, that's the thing. It's mostly human dominant.
Right, you're human dominant.
So everything else is outside of the norm and generally meant to be destroyed. It's threatening. It's gritty.
They're scared
I
of
only played it
everything.
for a little while, but yeah, I liked it. Perception. Okay, number 8. Perception of clients as whole persons, not just as individuals possessing symptoms. Everybody, we all fall into this, and you have to be really careful. You don't want to say that autistic person.
Right.
You want to say, if you have to even say, he's a person diagnosed with autism or somebody who's on the autism spectrum, but you want to make sure that you identify them as a person as people with disabilities, not disabled people. Because disabled people takes away their individual humanity.
And all the other words that people used to use.
And it becomes they are disabled rather than they are a person with disabilities.
Right.
So that it does have a psychological effect, alas. That's why people are like, why do you need to do it? And I get frustrated too. I'm like, can we quit being so politically correct and just get the work done? But it has a psychological effect.
Solve the problem.
Yeah, sometimes it gets too abstract. You can overdo it, but you do have to. The key is take into account the person first over the disease, not the disease. And medical industry focuses on the disease, and we work really hard to focus on the person.
Well, that's the difference between the holistic and the medical.
Exactly. Effects of major drugs. Now that's not just, like cocaine or pot or heroin or whatever. That can be prescription drugs of all kinds. That can be nicotine. That can be alcohol. That can be caffeine. Right? That's a big one. It's a huge one.
Drug in the in the world.
And it has a huge impact on people. And it's not really a drug, but it has a huge impact. Sugar, corn syrup variants and all that. Mm-hmm. Like you see when a player's blood sugar crashes and they become completely untenable. Yeah, you got to watch for those things, huh? That can really cause a problem.
That boy was like,
yep.
Wait a minute, you were just flying 12 seconds ago. Yep. Now you're like, okay, get him a Snickers bar.
Yeah, those commercials are right about the hangry. Number 10, health and safety information for working with clients. And clients can just be your players. So knowing that if, let's say you have a player who shows up who's on oxygen or a trach.
Right.
You can exclude them just because they're on that? Maybe you might want to learn a little bit about how, if something goes wrong, what you can do to help. Not saying you're a therapist, but, just to be a human being. Or, my front steps here often get ice on them. You guys have been nice enough to help with that. But, that's a health and safety issue. If players are coming to my game and they fall in my koi pond there, ooh, that could be bad. I have insurance, but still, I'd rather not have to go through that.
You have enough insurance for that?
My house, I do.
Okay.
And I've got millions in homeowners protection, but not that I'm encouraging anybody to go after it, because that's a nightmare. I still have to pay deductibles and stuff. It would suck.
You can't sue if they can't find the body.
Okay, John. Interesting.
That was fun in play therapy.
No, interesting. Yeah, you would not say interesting like that in play therapy. Number 11, medical and psychiatric terminology. Okay. As a GM, that's actually of value because, for example, a lot of games have sanity.
Right.
And you often have characters that are crazy in some way. And knowing the difference, because people get them mixed up all the time, between bipolar and schizophrenic and psychotic and all these other things. People munge them all together basically as they call everything. Now, it's not entirely layperson's fault because as of the 1950s, schizophrenia was an umbrella term for a lot of other disorders. Right. And it's over time that has been more and more differentiated. But a lot of people keep lumping together bipolar and schizophrenia. And they are completely different disorders. Completely different.
Sherlock Holmes. I'm a high-functioning sociopath.
Yeah, that's not untrue for Sherlock Holmes.
No, it's not. But I mean, there's a different diagnosis that people keep yelling at him. He says, "No, I'm a high-functioning sociopath, not the other one."
Oh, okay. I don't remember.
Psychopath versus sociopath.
Oh yeah, a little bit of difference between a sociopath and a psychopath. Yeah, right. Indeed. All right, but again, as a game master. Totally useful if you're especially creating, all kinds of complex scenarios, not just hack and slash and such. It really understanding that schizophrenia is a whole range of different symptoms. The majority of schizophrenics do not have auditory or visual hallucinations. They tend to have more rigid thoughts and behaviors and word salads and a lot of other symptoms. And then less commonly, the most common of the hallucinations are auditory. And the most rare are the visual ones. So you have that whole range of type of schizophrenia there. And a lot of people just assume it's all one thing.
According to the doctor that diagnosed somebody, Tourette's is the #1 neurological condition in the world. And everybody thinks it's swearing, but it's the twitches and
more than depression?
That's what he said.
More than depression.
He may have not been clarifying.
Yeah.
That's the words he used.
Yeah.
He didn't mention a comparison to anything else.
Yeah.
He said it's the most...
Huh. Okay. Interesting. I would have to hear the exact phrasing of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe he said underdiagnosed.
Yeah. That could be.
I think it was underdiagnosed.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would make more sense then. Number 12, principles of rehabilitation. So what is the process of rehabilitation? What do you need to know? Measurable goals, etc.
Mm-hmm.
13, concepts of health and wellness. Like, how do you set a goal if you don't know what that goal looks like? If you want to be healthy and well, what does that mean? 14, attitudes toward illness and disability. So this is a two-edged thing, because one is understanding about illness and disability and being compassionate, understanding, and accommodating. And the other is understanding that society has stigma about disabilities and that they're different. So somebody with a broken leg and a cast is much more likely to get sympathy than somebody who can't move their leg but isn't wearing any outward signs of a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who has an internal non-visible disability is going to be treated very differently from somebody who's in a wheelchair who clearly can't walk. These internal and external disabilities people react to very differently. And even you don't have to be a therapist for that to be important to understand as a game master and such, and being inclusive in your games. So understanding how to be inclusive and accessible, and understanding how people will react differently to different types of illnesses and disabilities. Number 15, self as a therapeutic agent. In other words, that, everything you need is here inside of you and that you need to be able to draw that out. That's very much the Maslow humanistic approach.
You've already known the answer.
Yeah, that's the extreme version.
That's Plato.
Yeah. Number 16, leadership of various recreation/leisure activities, arts and crafts, camping, games, sports. So number 1 for game masters and players who are taking a leadership role. Whether you want to be a leader or not, often players end up with a leader in the group. I kept becoming the leader, not because I wanted to be. I did not want to be the leader, and people kept making me the leader, whether it was in a role-playing game, whether it was in survivalism stuff, whether it was, I don't know, and I wasn't always the tallest when I was younger, right? I was tallest for my age, but I wasn't always there. I was often with people a lot older than me. And that often kept asking me to do leadership stuff that I didn't want to do. I did not want to.
You're a 13-year-old with a mustache.
No. No. My voice didn't change till I was 14.
Okay.
And then it changed dramatically in 1 year. And it was really hard to go through. I had a very high voice until I was 13. I was Vienna Boy Choir. Like 6th grade, they had me sing the Schubert Ave Maria for the whole school.
Dang.
Ave Maria, right? But as a Vienna Boy Choir type version. Right, because that's where my voice was. It's changed a little bit.
That's an impressive song to be doing at that age.
That was hard. Oh, I don't remember being nervous at all. Right? Remember I told you now I have all this. I don't know what changed. I don't know what triggered it because I don't remember a single event. I think it was my voice changing. I think that's what did it. I couldn't trust it anymore because I wasn't nervous at all when I did that.
Right.
But I think my voice changing just shattered everything. I don't know.
We have to make you do more dwarf songs.
Yes. 17, theory and technique of group leadership. So there's the leadership aspect, there's a couple of things, and then, of course, there's the interpersonal communication, Tuckman's rules, etc. Small group formation, and you need leadership in that to progress. Number 18, community leisure resources for client involvement, knowing where your gaming groups are, where your gaming resources are. So again, I'm going to keep tying them in also with just role-playing gaming in general. Number 19, activity analysis procedures. So breaking down the components and steps of an activity. Now, as therapists, we have to do that because we want to be able to tweak things. But in a game, breaking down and understanding what makes a tabletop role-playing game, and then tweaking it to fit your particular play style and interest. You have to do an activity analysis to do that. I guess we're going to have to go and stop here because it's 9 o'clock.
And some of the therapists out there don't like that breakdown.
No.
We don't have
They
to.
won't. Yeah, they won't do the theory. They won't do the breakdown. They won't do the logging. They won't do the assessments. baseline and exit to show actual measurable difference. It's all, yeah, I think they did a lot better. Of course they did a lot better. We observed them talking a lot more. Yeah, but how much more? Give me a quantity.
A lot.
Was it? Yeah, exactly. And that's unfortunate that, anyway. So we'll stop at number 20. Careful selection of activities to meet treatment aims, or in this case, picking the right game for your gamers. Right? We've talked about play styles and such. And if you pick a pure hack and slash for a bunch of storytellers, they're going to be bored. Sign language for bored.
Look at my nose.
Like, I like a good little short, brief hack and slash, but I get bored with hack and slash pretty darn quickly. I like all the other stuff interspersed with the danger of hack and slash. But I get very bored with dungeon crawls and pure dungeon crawls and pure puzzles and pure hack and slashes. They're fun for a little bit, and then they get really boring. Other people, they love just doing that all day long. So picking the right adventure for your players, knowing what that is. And in a broader term, picking the right form. LARP versus tabletop versus solo adventure books versus computer games versus VR, AR, or PR, any of these. Have I told you about PR? I don't know if I've taught you guys that yet.
PR? No.
Okay, so there's augmented reality, virtual reality, and persistent reality.
Does persistent reality require medication?
No. PR is kind of a variant of AR, VR and stuff, but it's stuff that changes, remain permanent and persistent and such. It's like so you have like a persistent world for servers.
Right.
So imagine with your AR, VR, rather than it kind of respawns and changes and everything like that, it's persistent changes and such happen in that virtual augmented reality and such. So you get the idea.
So if I come back later, what changes I made previously, I'll
still have the same effects, yeah, and it can be cumulative from others. Okay. But and you could leave a marker. So let's say you're doing AR type treasure hunts, right? What do they call those? Not geocaching or whatever.
Geocaching,
but with AR, right? They do that, which is like the Pokemon stuff and everything.
Okay, yeah.
But it's permanent locations and such that remain persistent. So those are all considerations and such, as opposed to you're walking along and getting updates of a sign and a person walking by and a license plate. Probably just the temperature cooling down on that, hopefully. Either that or about to be invaded.
Yeah.
Because you sure jumped on that one.
I did.
All right, so that was number 20. We have 24 more, which will continue the next time we do the next lecture on this module. But you can see how it ties in a lot with role-playing game. And again, this is just the checklist. Then we have to go deep on all 44 of these things eventually.
Right, of course.
Which is what I'm trying to move all that online. Because doing the lectures like this, it's going to bore people to tears versus being able to do it on your own. A little bit at a time is going to be more manageable. However, have we made a good illustration so far of a huge difference between play therapy and rec therapy tonight?
I think so. I just getting those examples of what play therapy is, I almost say that the word therapy is not even a good word for it. Because it is a diagnostic, it's more of a diagnostic tool than a method of treatment.
The play therapist, though, does much more than just that stage.
Right, after the fact.
Yeah. What we were talking about is just the initial assessment stage.
Now, another difference between play therapy and recreational therapy is National Play Therapy for 2019. National Play Therapy Week was February 3rd to the 9th, so you got. On the other hand, Recreational Therapy Month is the entire month of February is International Recreational Therapy Month.
Well, ooh la la! We got a whole month that we just made up. It's not an official government thing.
Hey, we were smart enough to make it a whole month and not a week. That's all I can say.
So, do you have an ATRA membership?
No.
You should get that at some point.
It's going to be...
it's another like $80 a year.
Per year. Can I break that up?
I don't think so.
Okay. I will look into that.
It's not required.
Okay. I need to go.
Yep.
My headache's
We're done.
worse.
We're done.
Looking at the screen is killing
Yep.
me.
Go take care of yourself. Do your self-care, Danielle.
All right.
And
Bye.
thanks for joining us. And let's see, you're not here Tuesday, you're not here Wednesday, and you guys are running what, Thursday?
Oh, what are we running this Thursday? We're playing...
board game.
We're playing the game that you...
Choose Your Own Adventure board game.
Correct.
Woohoo! All right. Thank
I'll
you
see
for...
you there.
All right, take care, Danielle. And thank you for watching. We hope you found it informative. Maybe not particularly entertaining, but we hope you found it informative. And our Patreon supporters, of course, will get access to this a month or more before the general public if you You can catch it live, but the recorded version, our Patreon supporters will get access to a month or more earlier. And we hope it helped in educating you about the differences between play therapy and recreation therapy and how these things do apply to role-playing gaming. Wherever you may be, wish you well, happy gaming, and namaste.
And dream well.
Peace out.